right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. I am absolutely thrilled that you are here. If you have never checked out our podcast before, we are primarily an interview and a commentary podcast. And today we're doing a little bit of both, okay? Because joining me on this discussion is Erica. Erica, how are you doing? So glad to see you.
Yeah, you too. I'm doing really great. Thanks.
Good. Yeah. Erica is very much an advocate for survivors. And she's been on the program before. One of the things that she has done, which I find very intriguing, is she's not only interviewed survivors, but she has interviewed people who have perpetrated things. Do you want to just give us a little background on that?
Sure. Yeah, I'm very much in the survivor corner for sure, but part of my work in advocacy is looking at how can we reduce sexual violence, and part of that is looking at how can we reduce the amount of offenders. And so I've had the unique opportunity of interviewing offenders, and that has been very interesting to ask them the tough questions.
Yes. That's an interesting field, and to find out more about her, you can find her on Twitter, and she is really big on TikTok. So if you have to, what is your screen name on TikTok?
Yeah, it's erica.with.ak.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. You definitely want to check out her content. Some really great stuff. The reason she is here and the reason I am here today is what we are going to be talking about is the Cleveland Browns. And as you know, I am not particularly a sports commentator. Opportunities throughout the years to do sports commentary have come up. I've had offers, but I just doing sports talk. It's not something that I could do. I mean, I like sports and I'm pretty knowledgeable with football, but that's just not a genre that really intrigues me. What we are going to talk about, which I believe transcends the world of sports, is the Deshaun Watson trade. I won't go through all the particulars of the trade itself. This was done with the Houston Texans and the Cleveland Browns. They've acquired a number of first-round draft picks and everything else. The amount of money that Deshaun has gotten from this deal, quite frankly, even by pro standards, is staggering. It involves $230 million, which is guaranteed. And the guaranteed part means win, lose, whatever, you get the money. And this comes out to not quite, I'm not sure what the math is, $44 million a year, something like that. He has had some legal issues. And basically what he has is 22 allegations against him. Recently, in terms of criminal court, those allegations were determined not to have enough merit to merit prosecution. So that doesn't necessarily translate into not guilty, which is what a lot of people have translated this into. It just simply means that between the grand jury, prosecutors, whatever, they determined that they didn't have enough evidence to move forward with criminal allegations. He does have 22 civil cases still pending. And the one thing I would definitely say about this, if I was in charge of this deal, I would have had to have said before this goes forward, you got this, but at the very least, you got to clear up these 22 civil cases. But as it stands right now, they're still pending. And we don't know what the outcomes of those are going to be. Now, being that he is wealthy, to say the least, he could have the opportunity possibly to make these allegations go away relatively quickly. That's wealthy privilege, I guess. You have the power to pay to make these go away. And that's not as bad as it sounds. The civil system is that's the only recourse that you have. You can't send somebody to jail in the civil system. The only punitive measure that you have in a civil suit is some sort of a monetary payout, and that usually means some form of cash. From what I understand, roughly 18 of these accusers are willing to negotiate. There's a number that are holding out. I don't know what the details are. Here again, me personally, I feel that he should at least clear these up. And to make it really, really solid, I would like it to come with some sort of an apology or some acknowledgement. But that's probably never going to happen. Usually these things are set up in a way where the people that get the payouts can't talk about the case. I'll before I kind of go to Erica on this, the other thing I would say is that in full disclosure, this is a situation where there are allegations. Nothing has been proven yet. So that is a fact. That is what we are dealing with in this case. So that being the case, a lot of what you're going to hear during this podcast is opinion. It is, conjecture, and it does deserve a certain amount of discussion. I would also say it's a pretty good, solid truth that although we can't determine what quote unquote the truth is, a lot of people have chosen to ignore 22 versions of the truth. And that's kind of where we're going to go with this. Your initial reactions, Erica, to this are what?
I have a lot of initial reactions. I mean, this is not obviously the first time this has happened. This is something that happens every day where someone is accused. And oftentimes when someone speaks out with an accusation, we see more and more people speak out.
Yes. A lot of people say, well, it's a he said, she said situation, and it is, although it's been multiplied over numerous times. Let's start getting away from the allegations themselves. Let's just probe in terms of our opinion a certain amount of weirdness here. Erica, have you ever received a massage?
Yes.
Okay. Do you go from dozens and dozens and dozens of massage therapists in a short period of time?
No, typically I have one or two maybe that I'm like, these people give great massages, and that's who I go to.
Yes. Now here again, this is not illegal. If you want to go to many, many, many different massage therapists as for whatever reason over a short period of time, that's your prerogative. It's not illegal. But here's where the weirdness comes in. Getting back to a he said, she said situation. Typically, predators put themselves in those situations, and being alone, a big, strong person being alone in a room in a state of undress with somebody where your privacy has to be respected. This is fertile ground for, let's say, allegations to occur. Would you not agree?
Yes. I mean, this is not only in massage parlors, but doctors' offices. I mean, there's several instances and environments that really can breed accusations and predatory behavior.
Sure. The other thing I would say, too, is that what I don't understand, I do understand, but what I don't understand is that if you are someone who, let's say, wants some freaky behavior out there, there's no shortage of consenting adults. I mean, I can tell you it's a crazy world out there. When I was young and single, I actually had some women scare me to the point where I decided this is not a good thing. Okay. And I would imagine being a millionaire professional star athlete, you will have plenty of willing participants who want to do anything you want to do. What the issue here is, it's the intimidation. That's where the thrill comes from. Role playing isn't enough. They actually want
the power.
And the power. Yes. They don't just necessarily want to play boss and secretary. They want to be the boss. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's something that predators generally do. Now, here again, none of this is proof, but this is all part of a very interesting set of coincidences or circumstances that just fall together in these situations. I'm going to go. What I got here is I made a list. Okay. And speaking to the ugly side of how survivors are treated, I want you to respond to some of these. I've picked some of these responses off of the internet in regard to people defending what the Browns have done. This is this actually came from a female. And what's interesting, this was on a major television station in Cleveland. they, for some reason, and I don't typically watch the 6 o'clock and the 11 o'clock news, but I watched it at both times on the same channel, and they featured this woman both times. It was bizarre. I believe what happened here was somebody, when this news broke about Deshaun Watson, somebody sent somebody out and said, go get some on the street reactions. And this guy was probably in a hurry to get home, and he went into the local bar, and there's a bunch of ding ding sitting at the bar going, "Oh, way to go, brownies, yo, yo, yo," and all that kind of thing. And he went over to these young ladies and asked them what they thought of Deshaun Watson being brought in the shadow of these allegations. And these women said, and I'll throw this to you, why can't we just keep the past in the past? Why do we always have to call out people's past? What would you say to that?
I would say that on average, if a victim does come forward, on average, it can take 10 years for them to come forward, because they oftentimes don't fully realize what happened to them. And so oftentimes there's this waiting period, and sometimes someone else comes out and they say, "Oh my gosh, this happened to me too by this person." Okay. The other thing is that it doesn't matter if it happened yesterday, 10 years ago, 50 years ago, it still happened, and it's still a traumatic event.
Yes. In this case in particular too, and I often say this about other crimes that are committed, we have this vision of, let's say, a murderer, and we have this vision of Harrison Ford. He's the fugitive. He comes home and he kneels over his wife who's been murdered, and the police barge in and said, "Why you do it?" That isn't how people typically end up in prison. Okay. Anybody can be in the wrong place at the wrong time once. When you're in the wrong place at the wrong time 22 times, and those are the ones we know of, that tells me that there's a pattern. Would you agree with that?
Correct.
Yes. Okay. So that's kind of, like I said, I don't know. But anyhow, this was said to a female on Twitter. This was said to a female who did not like the trade, did not like the fact that Deshaun Watson was being brought in, and said that she was not going to watch the Browns anymore. A male said to her, "Then you were never a fan to begin with." Do you have a response to that?
It's baffling to me how, people will protect someone who is accused. And what I will say is this, is that, the rate of false accusations is incredibly low. And I will say, even within that statistic, there are people who recant their accusation because of fear of intimidation. And that is also lumped oftentimes into these statistics. And so when we look at, 98% of accusations being true and 2% being false, and sometimes there's the recants in there too. It just baffles me how someone can focus on the potential 2% versus the reality of the 98% of true accusations. I mean, think of it this way. Sexual violence is the most prevalent crime, or one of the most prevalent crimes, yet it is the most underreported crime.
Yes.
It's 1 in 3 women, 1 in 4, 1 in 5 men. And, for someone to say that they're not a fan anymore, I mean, if sexual violence hasn't happened to that person, it has certainly happened to someone in their very close circle of friends, family, you name it.
Yeah. This is another remark that was made to a female by a male. And I believe this was on Twitter as well. And here again, this is missing the mark in a number of different ways. And I'll explain, but I'll let you react first. This here again, said by a male to a female. "This is just a game. Don't take it so serious." Does this really have anything to do with the fact that it's a game?
No. And I think that there are men in particular who get really upset when, women are coming out and responding to their experiences and will say, "Men did this to me," or they use the phrase "all men." And then we have, oftentimes men responding in this type of way. And if they don't want the bad reputation, they really need to be holding fellow men accountable too, rather than people's reactions and to their experiences or what's out there.
Yes. And my response to that would be, yes, it is just the game. And for that reason, when you behave badly, you should be held to a higher standard. Okay. Because of the fact that you are influencing children, you are influencing the image of what success is supposed to be. And you shouldn't be telling police, like a lot of them have, don't you know who I am when they get stopped for speeding? No, it should be the other way around. You should be held to a higher standard in your conduct, being the fact that you are being paid in a lot of cases a mountain of money to play a game. That privilege should come with some responsibility. That's my take on that.
But think of it this way too. If someone's saying it's just a game, think of all the people who come into and watch the game and how many people are survivors themselves. Like I said, the 1 in 3 women, 1 in 4 men have experienced sexual violence over their lifetimes. And so when you are paying and rewarding someone to play, think of all the people who have experienced sexual violence, and the Browns chose money over people's experiences.
Yes. Another remark made by it. Now, this was by a man, and this was made. Different versions of this same remark were made to both men and women who were complaining about the trade. They didn't like the Deshaun Watson deal, and different versions of this has gone to both men and women in defense of the trade. Let's find out what your opinion is when he brings home a Super Bowl. So, Erica, is your opinion about Deshaun or this situation going to change when and if they win a Super Bowl?
It shouldn't matter. They are separate instances.
Absolutely.
They're separate events. Someone should not be rewarded for bad behavior. And yes, this is going to a civil suit. And yes, I could talk all day about the burdens victims face and why people don't report, or the burden of proof on the victim and the legal system. We could have that conversation. But, I think to your point, there are active civil suits happening.
Yes.
And that is irrespective of if someone wins a Super Bowl or not. These are people's lives that have been affected.
Yes. This one was made by a female. And here again, the whole premise of the remark is misguided. But the fact that people are justifying this in these terms is what's troubling to me. I'm not sure if they're ignoring the situation or if they simply don't have the mental capacity to understand it. I'm not sure. But this one was very interesting, made by a female defending the trade. Why can't we keep politics out of football?
This isn't political.
Yes.
I mean, this is something that happens to people on the left, on the right, in the middle, not on any side. This is not a political thing whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I totally agree. This isn't a situation where Deshaun is, being criticized because he wants to vote for a particular candidate or he advocates for a cause that we don't agree with. That would be bringing politics into football. Okay. Having allegations of this kind of misconduct has nothing to do with bringing politics into the picture. Here's kind of where I want to go. You talk about the fans. The fans themselves. When I talk at the end of this podcast, I'm going to do a little summary, and I'm going to bring this up. I have had any number of experiences, but I'm not 21 years old anymore. I've watched the game of football and society and everything else evolve over the years. And I would have to say that the fans themselves, there have been a number of people who not only have had allegations, but they've had, criminal things proven that they've lost the case on. And they somehow or other end up back on the field. And men and women alike, women wear their jerseys and cheer them as they walk onto the field. What does that say about, we can blame the players, we can blame the owners, But these things wouldn't happen if they weren't ultimately well received. And there's a part of me that knows that the Browns had a little powwow about this. And they made the determination, yeah, there's going to be a big stink initial on. But then once the summer rolls around and training camp starts and all this other stuff, it's going to go by the wayside. And they're probably right. They're probably right. Once the winning starts, it's going to get forgotten about. What does that say, do you think? Do we have a societal issue here?
Of course, we have a societal issue. You know, I think that, you know, when it comes to news and what we consume, right? And like I said before, how sexual violence is one of the most prevalent crimes. I mean, there's going to be another man or woman or who's going to have accusations, and that's going to be the next story, and then the focus is going to be there. And I mean, when you look at people who have had numerous accusations, it is a long list.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way to keep the focus, you know, especially in the media, because it just changes all the time.
Yeah.
But that's where it's important for people like you and me and the public to keep that conversation going, to not forget people's names, to know if it's public information, know who these survivors are, because, you know, their experience matters.
Right. Let me put this thing with the Browns in perspective for you. And I don't mean for you. I just mean for you, and as in general. Let me try to put another lens on this. In another world, if you had a player that had 22 allegations against him, 22 pending civil suits, has not played for a year, okay, in another world, that brand would be damaged. But in this world, it's worth $230 million. And the Browns picked it up. Now, let's say, Erica, you own a plumbing company. You have 24 plumbers working for you, and somebody comes and applies and says, I want to work for your company. And you do a background check and you find out that this plumber who wants to work for you has 22 allegations against him, 22 pending civil lawsuits for sexual assault. Are you going to hire them and send them into somebody's home?
Of course not. Of course not.
Yes. And if you did,
it's a liability. Of course not.
Yes. If you did, that was my next point. I don't know how I'm sure the Browns and their legal team found a way to protect themselves. Okay. But my guess is if I was the Browns, I would keep this guy on a short leash, because this sounds to me like a very much a pattern of behavior. And is it over? It's one thing to say if he settles these lawsuits, are these things going to continue? And if he's representing the Browns on the road, and let's say he decides to get himself a massage while he's out on the road somewhere, I might want to be sending somebody with him. Okay. Do you feel that comparison, you know, with what happens with most normal business circumstances, because of the enormous amount of money and the legal teams that these teams can afford, that they can take a chance like that with very little risk, where an average business owner could not?
Exactly. And you know, that's another point too, is that not only do perpetrators use and exert power over their victims, but then there are the systems around them that enable them because of their power and money. So, I mean, this is a prime example. I mean, Deshaun Watson is not the first player to have numerous allegations, whether it's sexual violence, domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are several. And we see this over and over and over again. It is a cycle. Yes. And, you know, survivors and, you know, we deserve accountability. And sadly, perpetrators don't often take accountability.
Sure. Yes. Erica, as always, it is absolutely great to have you on. I'm so glad you're doing well. Should I tell the audience that you're
Sure.
expecting? Yes.
Yeah, any day now. So
Awesome. Well, you are glowing. Yeah, there's
thank you.
something there. There's a truth to that. You are glowing. I'm
Thanks.
going to say a few words here, and then I will give Erica the final thoughts. Okay. So let me try to sum this up as best I can. Like I said, I can't speak to the guilt or innocence in legal terms of what's involved here with Deshaun Watson. That's something right now that only a few people know the absolute truth of. And anybody who's ever taken a philosophy class or a logic class knows that what we might call an absolute truth is very elusive. But the broader picture requires just a little bit of common sense, how we examine these things. Like I said earlier, it's one thing to be in the wrong place at the wrong time once. It's another thing to be there 20, 30, or 40, or 50 times like some of these guys are. There's an old song that came out a long time ago that basically says, "Where have you gone, Joe DiMaggio? Our nation turns its lonely eyes to you." And I kind of feel that's very appropriate. That's a bygone era. That was an era when players cared about the fans. He was very famous for saying that I have to play my best every day because there might be one kid in that stand and their only time to ever witness a big league game is that day. So I want to make sure I play my best for him. I can also say I have a lot of respect for Joe DiMaggio in the wake of Marilyn Monroe's death and the Kennedys and everything else. He could have exploited her memory, but he didn't. And yeah, they don't make really guys like him anymore, do they? Now, there's been other good people in professional sports. Vince Lombardi, Walter Payton, Gale Sayers, Roger Staubach, all of these people we remember not only because they were good players, but they were good people. A lot of the things that they implemented in terms of their discipline and their dedication to perfection is something that you can dedicate to any aspect of your life, no matter what you are doing, whether it's being a good father, a good mother, a good dentist, whatever the case may be. Those ideals, I feel, are very important. And I've always felt that playing sports is very good for a child. It can give them self-worth. It can give them a lot of things. But anymore, is that really the case? Professional sports now are about winning at any cost, making sure that those ratings stay up, making sure that all the sales for the T-shirts and the cups and the hats and everything stay up. That's what's important, winning at all cost. And I'm not necessarily putting the corporate world in a bad light. I'm not an anti-capitalist by any stretch of the imagination. Somebody like Henry Ford, Steve Jobs, these people not only provided value to our economy, but they transformed the way we live. And there's nothing wrong with that. But here's the kicker. You have to believe in the product, or at least I do. That product has to represent a certain value. And what we are dealing with here now is a corporate structure, not only in the case of professional football, but a corporate structure whose value isn't so much providing a good product as it is keeping the numbers up, whether it be by exploiting acquisitions and just turning them over, liquidating them after you buy them. In the old days, in the Old West, it was an old trick for companies who build railroads to make windy railroad paths so that they got paid by the mile. And here again, that money came through not really by providing a value. So let's go back to the Browns. The Browns, for the most part, have been a very loved franchise, even though they don't win a lot of the times. They are notorious for snatching defeat out of the jaws of victory. And yes, I've said that correctly. That's what the Browns do. Okay. And they are, for some reason, the lovable underdog. That in and of and by itself has had a great value. They are one of the most popular franchises in the country, despite the fact that they really aren't known for winning like the Dallas Cowboys. So what are they doing to their brand now? Are they becoming the brand that's building the windy railroad? Are they the company that's doing that for the sake of getting the numbers up? And are they cheapening the product that they have had as a storied franchise since the game began? Paul Brown, I mean, we're talking about the guy who invented the face mask. This is their legacy. It is incredibly good. And are they becoming the Ponzi scheme on the stock market? Is that what they are becoming? That's a question. I brought this up to Erica, and I'll say it again. You know, we can ask where Joe DiMaggio went, but we can also ask where that fan base went. The fan base itself is something that has broken. I'm not necessarily a big LeBron James fan, but there's videos of people shouting things at him from the court side, and they think it's funny, so they videotape it, and they say god awful things to this man. Now, I hear again, I find that bizarre. I find that shocking. Some of these people have said god awful things to him. This is where the fans have changed as well. This is where the fans are all about winning just as much as the owners are, just as much as the players. The players get accused of not being loyal to the fans, but how loyal are the fans are to the players? This is a dynamic. I think that there is a societal problem here that transcends not only the way that we view survivors, but the way we view other people, the way we interpret what value really means. Does value always equate to dollars? And I will say this too. I grew up in Canton, Ohio, and every year, you know, the pageantry begins midsummer, gearing up for the enshrinement and what eventually becomes the start of the season. And I hear the word hero mentioned a lot. I do not have a fascination with a cult of celebrity like a lot of people do. I hear the word hero every summer. And here again, I have no problem with these guys being dedicated, you know, getting out there and making good for themselves any more than somebody who started a business or anything else. I have no problem with capitalism in that regard. But being successful financially, whether it's in sports or whether it's in business or show business or whatever, does not make you a hero. The origins of the word hero come from of self. Okay. These guys aren't throwing themselves on grenades. These guys aren't running into buildings that are burning, risking life and limb for a salary, mind you, that just barely covers the cost of living. That isn't what these guys are doing. Okay. When you meet a successful person, you say, wow, you've done good for yourself. That's exactly what the opposite of what the word hero means. They are successful people, and they don't deserve a license because of the fact that they in some way bring success to us, whether it's downtown after a game and everybody's buying drinks and pizzas and all that stuff. That doesn't give them. That's what they are paid to do. That's why they are paid big dollars. They're not doing us a favor, and they don't deserve any special consideration. Empathy is something that I'll end with, because in all of this discussion, everything I've just said about how we treat each other now, how society has changed, how we gauge what a value is in a product, that has changed. And one thing that is missing is empathy. Here again, I've been around a long time. The LGBT plus community. I've been around while that evolved. I've been around. I've very much worked closely with nonprofits in regard to mental health and addiction. I've been around that as it evolved. And I've heard these things said. I've heard these things said about the LGBTQ plus community. Oh, they don't want equal rights. They want special rights. And that's true right up into the time it's your kid. When it's your kid who comes home from his fourth grade class with half of his hair missing, and you say, what happened? Well, the nurse had to cut off my hair because a bunch of kids poured glue all over my head. And you say, oh, can't they see my boy's a little different? Can't they see somebody needs to keep an eye on him? And then all of a sudden, these special rights have a different meaning. They have a different tenure. And unfortunately, we can't experience that until it impacts us. Same goes with addiction. Oh, well, people chose to take drugs. That's right up until the time it's your kid that's in the emergency room suffering from an overdose. And you find out he had some emotional problems and he was self-medicating. You say, well, in that case, it was different. No, it wasn't. That's the case that everybody goes through. And now you have a different appreciation of it because it's hit your home. What I would hope when it comes to survivors is we can put ourselves in the place of some of these people who have gone through things. And I wouldn't want to be in a situation where, my daughter comes home and says, Daddy, I have to talk to you. Something happened to me last night. And you go to an investigator, and this investigator sits back in his chair and he interlaces his fingers on his big fat stomach and says, well, these things can be a little delicate. You know how young people are with the hormones and everything, things get to going and they get a little out of hand. And what we have here is a he said, she said situation. And then you find out the person who did this to your daughter has 20 other accusations waiting in the queue. And you stand up and you pound the table and say, that son of a bitch raped my daughter. And maybe in that little moment, you'll realize it'll kick in. This is what it feels like. And I would hope that we can feel empathy in those situations for people who have gone through it without waiting to the time to learn it ourselves. And maybe we can prevent some of these things from happening. Anyway, that's my commentary on that. Erica, do you want to follow up?
Yes. And I think that was really beautifully stated about empathy, because you're right. A lot of times, unless it really happens to us or someone very close to us, then we're not necessarily impacted. And what I will say is that I can't tell you how many times I see people asking questions of, why wasn't this reported sooner? Or why, all these questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have to ask, are you actually asking these questions to understand? Because plenty of people are telling you the answer and the reasons why people either don't report or they waited, what have you.
Yes.
And right. Or are you asking to really defend and side with the oppressor or the perpetrator?
Yeah.
And so what I would say in regards to empathy is, if you are someone who genuinely wants to understand, right? Like you're asking a question, why? Google is there. You can Google all these reasons. People for decades have been saying why.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of people who are sharing their own personal experiences of why. And so it's really important that if you're asking these questions, are you asking and seeking to understand? Or are you asking to defend and side with a perpetrator?
Yeah. Yes. That is something, empathy is something that unfortunately we can say the words, we can try to teach people what it means, but it takes a very special person to actually feel it. And it shouldn't be. That should be something that most humans can do pretty easily. But we have a tendency to dismiss things that happen outside of our sphere. For example, our particular candidate gets accused of something like this and all those. And I actually heard this word described. I'm saying this word for a reason. Somebody, and I didn't even ask you to it because it's so off the mark, it doesn't even require you to respond to it. But I want to point out that this is the attitude. Somebody spoke about these 22 accusers as whores who want to take advantage of a rich athlete. Okay. That's what you say when it's your man. When it's your guy, that's the politician that's running. We dismiss these accusations. When it's the other guy, when it's the guy in Pittsburgh, oh, that's terrible. I can't believe it. And there's it's different when it's not in your bubble. And we really have to step outside of these ideological bubbles. A bad actor is a bad actor. It doesn't matter if he's conservative or if he's liberal or if we like his politics or not, or if we're a big fan of what he does on the football field, or if we like his music or not. These things do not factor into what has happened in those situations. And we really, as a society, got to stop being starstruck with these idiots, a lot of them, and allowing them to have their way. I don't think that you would agree with me that ideology plays a very big role in how we view these accusations when it comes to who's being accused.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I see it all the time on social media, like you just said, where if you are in someone's corner, you are, more on their side and might make excuses for them. But this is not a political thing.
Yes.
And, I myself have identified more with a certain party, but when I see someone within a certain party behaving badly or having numerous accusations, I call them out too, because it is not a political thing.
Yes. Erica, first of all, I want to thank you for all your advocacy, and you do a fantastic job. Follow her on TikTok. What is it again on TikTok? I'll let you get that one more time.
So it's erica.with.ak.
Okay.
And so Erica with a K. Mm-hmm.
Is there any other places online you want to direct people to?
I mean, I'm on Twitter, and my handle there is Equality Matters. But yeah, I mean, you could Google me and find me there too. So
awesome. You do great work. I know you got a lot going on in your life. You truly are glowing. My best wishes for you. Much success. Please stay in touch. Keep doing what you're doing. You're making the world a better place. And I myself, and I'm sure a lot of other people are very grateful for what you do.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
No, sure. I'm Billy Dees, and you can find the Billy Dees Podcast pretty much anywhere podcasts are found. And I would direct you in particular to our friends over at Good Pods. That's a great app that doesn't necessarily push the shows that got a lot of money behind them. So it's a great way to find independent creators, and it's Good Pods. Check them out. Very highly rated podcast app. And you can find us pretty much on all the major apps as well. And you can find me on Twitter at Billy Dees. It's going to be interesting to find out and kind of observe how this is handled from a public relations standpoint with the Deshaun Watson situation and the Browns. We'll keep tabs on it. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll talk to you again next week.